Welcome back to The Truth About the Market, where we peel back every layer of this industry, sometimes gently, sometimes with a crowbar, so we can all understand what's really going on behind the hangar doors. I'm Jason Zilberbrand, president of VREF. I have appraised just about everything from Cessnas to Gulfstreams for clients that range from the FAA and SpaceX to celebrities, Fortune 50 companies, as well as fleets you have definitely heard of. And most importantly, I have owned, sold, and operated my own aircraft. And equally important, this podcast is sponsor-free. There's no commercial paid-for opinions, no spins, just the unfiltered truth. Today's episode is a deep dive, and I mean trench-level deep, into something that is reshaping the aviation landscape whether we like it or not, and that's privacy. We're going to talk about the ADS-B registry reform and what happens when transparency and the backbone of aviation transactions collides with a world that is demanding more secrecy and privacy. We're living in a strange moment for aviation privacy. The FAA's newest rules, part of the 2024 Reauthorization Act, now lets aircraft owners hide their names and addresses from the public registry. That is a massive shift. For over a century, ever since the Wright brothers stitched numbers onto the side of their wooden flyers, aircraft ownership has been an open book. You could always look up who owned what, where it was based, and whether it was airworthy. Now, well, that curtain's closing. And when you mix this new privacy layer with today's world, where anyone with a smartphone can track an aircraft's movements, you start to see the tension building. We've had real-life stalking incidents. Celebrity jets followed online like a sport. Robberies planned around aircraft schedules. Foreign owners who prefer quiet transactions, or those hiding in plain sight like the cartel activity and Wright brothers escrow. There's corporate espionage teams watching rival planes instead of their earnings reports. Even the deep-pocketed legal teams behind Taylor Swift and Elon Musk firing off demand letters that track their flights to stop them altogether. So this isn't just about hiding an address on a form. It's about the collision between safety, privacy, money, fame, national security, and a century-old expectation of transparency. And depending on how the FAA balances these pressures, this could either protect people in a very real way, or it could completely disrupt how aircraft are bought, sold, financed, insured, and verified. If information disappears faster than we can replace it with something reliable, we may break the entire transactional side of aviation without meaning to. So this episode is designed to hit roughly the 30-minute mark. It's intentionally built using documented facts, real-world examples, regulatory filings, industry commentary, and lived-through transactional experience from aviation trenches. As always, I'm giving it to you straight. So buckle up, settle in, and let's talk about what this means for all of us: buyers, sellers, lenders, escrow agents, brokers, operators, and yes, even appraisers. If you're navigating an aircraft transaction in this new privacy landscape, don't guess. Protect your deal with data, analysis, and expertise the industry already relies on. Visit vref.com or reach out to my team whether you're buying, selling, financing, or just need clarity. VREF is your advantage. So, Act 1, how we got here. To understand why the FAA has suddenly become the privacy police, you have to go back to what the Aircraft Registry used to be. For decades, the FAA Civil Aviation Registry in Oklahoma City was the gold standard. Transparent, reliable, comprehensive. A simple N-number search told you almost everything you needed to know about an aircraft's ownership history. You could see who owned it, where they lived, what liens existed, how many times it changed hands, whether or not the last owner was a person or an LLC or a trust with 14 nested entities. This transparency was essential. It wasn't optional. It wasn't decorative. It was essential. It supported the entire ecosystem of aviation commerce. Lenders relied on it to secure collateral. Escrow agents depended on it to verify sellers. Brokers used it to qualify listings. Appraisers used it to compile data history. Title attorneys used it to ensure lien continuity. And law enforcement, regulators, taxing authorities, and investigative journalists all used it to ensure compliance, safety, and lawfulness. And then came ADS-B. In 2020, the ADS-B out mandate flipped the entire equation. Suddenly, aircraft began broadcasting their identity, their position, altitude, speed, and other flight details every half second to the public. And by public, I don't mean the FAA or ATC or NASA. I mean anybody with a laptop and a $50 receiver they bought online. ADS-B democratized real-time flight tracking in ways nobody fully anticipated. And as soon as that happened, the privacy issues began to snowball. Let me give you a few real-world examples of how wild this whole flight tracking issue has gotten. Take Elon Musk. A college kid starts posting real-time updates of Musk's jet, where it's going, when it takes off, when it lands. The account blows up globally. Suddenly, we're not just talking about a billionaire's travel schedule. We're talking about safety threats, congressional hearings, and a full-blown debate about whether this kind of tracking should even be allowed. Then you got Taylor Swift. Fans and a few people who definitely weren't just fans were tracking her movements the exact same way. Public data freely available. Then her legal team jumps in. And overnight, it becomes a national conversation about celebrity safety and privacy and whether our aviation system accidentally exposes people to real danger. And it's not just celebrities. Corporate espionage took this to another level. Companies figured out that they could scrape flight data to see where their competitors' jets were going. That meant predicting mergers, plant expansions, regulatory trouble. Basically, it was insider information without ever touching insider information. Well, the National Business Aircraft Association even had to step in and raise the alarm formally. Then there's college sports. Journalists use the same data to track NCAA coaches' travel patterns, and suddenly we've got recruiting violations popping up like popcorn. What about the NFL robberies? The list is endless. On the geopolitical side, open source analysts use flight tracking to follow Russian oligarch aircraft during sanction crackdowns. That showed the world why transparency can matter and how powerful this data really is. Finally, repossession agents. These guys started using flight tracking like a treasure map, finding aircraft in default, locating them in real time, and grabbing them before owners could disappear. Helpful? Sure. A little terrifying? Also, yes. So when you stack all of that together, celebrities, billionaires, corporate secrets, college sports, professional sports, international sanctions, repossessions, you can see why the FAA ended up in a political pressure cooker. Privacy wasn't some fringe aviation topic anymore. It was mainstream and it was exploding. So now let's talk about the real plot twist. Section 803 of the FAA's 2024 Reauthorization Act. For this first time in U.S. aviation history, aircraft owners can ask the FAA to hide their name and address from the public registry, not erase it, not cloak it from law enforcement or regulators, just remove it from public view. And that sounds simple until you realize who the public actually is in aviation. It's buyers, it's lenders, it's brokers, it's title attorneys, it's appraisers, it's insurance carriers, it's maintenance shops doing conformity checks. It's everyone trying to make sure that the aircraft they're dealing with is legitimate, is financed properly, is airworthy, is safe to fly. The intention behind Section 803 was noble. Protect people from stalking. Protect people from harassment and competitive spying, even physical harm. After all of the high-profile cases we just talked about, yes, that need was real. But the impact, way more complicated. Because overnight, the U.S. Aircraft Registry, the gold standard of transparency, the system that made global aviation commerce fast, efficient, and extremely hard to defraud, suddenly got cloudy. This wasn't about giving billionaires some VIP privacy upgrade. This was about cutting off access to the foundational information that the entire aviation marketplace depends on. And the tremor hit every corner of the industry. Deals slowed down, lien searches got messy, title opinions became riskier, appraisals are taking longer, international transactions, well, they're taking even longer. Fraud? Well, let's just say the door wasn't locked the way it used to be. Section 803 didn't just reshape privacy, it reshaped the infrastructure under every aircraft transaction in the United States. And that brings us to the real turning point in this story, because once Section 803 rolled out, the industry just didn't shrug and move on. No, everyone suddenly had skin in the game. Brokers started asking how they were supposed to verify ownership without calling in favors. Lenders wondered how they could underwrite risk when half the information evaporated overnight. Title attorneys started sweating over liability. Appraisers like yours truly found themselves piecing together data that used to be a click away. Foreign buyers asked whether the United States had just made itself harder to do business with. And even the FAA realized they might have opened up Pandora's box with no easy way to close it. You know, every smart aviation decision starts with accurate numbers. If you want real-time valuations, market intelligence, or a professional appraisal backed by the largest aircraft appraisal firm in the country, go to VREF.com. Get the numbers right before someone else gets them wrong for you. So, where the industry, the government, and the entire aviation ecosystem scramble to figure out what happens next, because privacy is here, the rules have changed, and the question isn't whether aviation adapts, it's how fast and at what cost. So now here's where it gets ironic, almost comedic if it weren't so serious. While the FAA is busy hiding names and addresses on the registry, the single biggest privacy leak in all of aviation is still blasting out to the entire planet 24/7, and that's ADS-B out. Every modern aircraft is continuously broadcasting its position, altitude, speed, and identity to anybody with a receiver, an internet connection, or a hobbyist flight tracking app. Governments capture it, companies capture it, universities capture it, teenagers capture it, and websites, they archive it forever. So even if you hide your name on their registry and block your tail number and rotate your digital ID or enroll in every privacy program the FAA offers, your airplane is still out there shouting your location like a megaphone strapped to the wing. And here's the kicker. The FAA solved the part about the problem that was easiest to change, the registry, not the part that actually fuels 90% of the privacy violations, because even if your name disappears from public records, your patterns don't. Your aircraft still flies the same routes, lands at the same home airport, routines to the same hangar, and keeps the same schedule. And that's enough for anyone with a laptop to connect the dots. And that's the split inside the industry right now. Privacy advocates say that the new rules don't go far enough, that hiding the registry info without fixing ADS-B creates a false sense of security. And the brokers and lenders and escrow agents and appraisers say the opposite, that the registry blackout breaks the transaction ecosystem without addressing the real source of the tracking abuse. And the uncomfortable truth, they're both right. And that brings us to the part of the story that hits closest to home, the part nobody outside the industry ever thinks about. Because privacy isn't just about celebrities and billionaires and internet sleuths. It's about whether the aviation marketplace itself can keep functioning without grinding into chaos. And that takes us right into the last act of this story. Because if we talk about the bloodstream of aviation commerce, transactions, right? Buying and selling and financing, insuring and leasing and appraising aircraft all depend on transparency. And nothing shakes trust like missing data. Escrow has blinders. Escrow agents are the referees of aviation. They verify ownership. They check signatures. They compare documents. They confirm airworthiness paperwork and ensure the seller has legal standing. If the registry now hides ownership information, escrow agents lose their fastest tool for verification. Suddenly, simple checks require extra steps, more documents, more declarations, more validation. Every additional step increases time and risk. And then what happens? Lenders get nervous. Aircraft lenders already manage a portfolio with unique risks. They have engine programs and maintenance events and depreciation and cross-border enforcement. When you add ownership opacity and lenders begin to question, is the borrower the real owner? Are prior liens truly cleared? Is this aircraft tied to a trust with hidden beneficial owners? Could this expose the bank to KYC issues? Banks will respond in predictable ways. Slower loan approvals, more legal opinions, more documentation requirements, higher rates, fewer approvals. This isn't theory. This is how banks behave under uncertainty. And then what happens when the banks have uncertainty? Brokers lose their ability to confirm, right? So a good broker verifies who owns the aircraft, whether the seller has authority, whether the trust documents line up. Without registry access, brokers may unintentionally negotiate with people who do not actually have the legal standing to sell the aircraft, or worse, they could become a target of fraud. Bedroom brokers will especially be vulnerable. And then appraisers and market analysts, they lose the data altogether. The aviation marketplace thrives on data. Provenance matters. Ownership matters. Transfer history matters. Engine program enrollment matters. Transparency creates confidence for buyers and sellers. The confidence creates the liquidity in the marketplace. When the transparency erodes, the valuation process becomes more uncertain. The risk premium rises, deals slow down, and market signals weaken. This affects lenders and buyers and sellers, insurance companies and tax authorities. It really does impact everybody because at the end of the day, it raises red flags. Title professionals at Corporate Jet Investor and AIN Commentary have already stated that hiding owner names undermines one of the core pillars of the aviation registry, title assurance. Without knowing current ownership, confirming lien validity becomes harder, tracing prior interest becomes slower, resolving discrepancy becomes more expensive. Aviation does not want to become the real estate industry, where a deed search requires 6 departments, 3 counties, and a seance? Come on, people. Because fraud's going to find opportunity. Less transparency is always good for one group: fraudsters, fake sellers, forged documents. Misrepresented trusts and hidden beneficial ownership structures become easier when the registry is opaque. The DOT Inspector General has already documented misuse of opaque trusts in the past. Section 803 unintentionally reopens that door. And then repossessions and enforcement slows down. And when repossession agents and lenders and insurance companies rely on the registry and the ADSB data to track assets, when the registry clarity drops, enforcement actions may be delayed or contested. This increases lenders' risk and ultimately affects the cost of capital in the industry. So here's the truth. Aviation needs both privacy and transparency, but the current system only strengthened privacy in the registry while leaving operational transparency untouched. The result is a half solution that protects against some risks while amplifying others. Privacy advocates argue that individuals deserve protection from stalking and harassment and flight shaming and corporate targeting, and they are right. But transactional professionals argue that transparency is essential for safety and compliance and financing and fraud protection. And they're also right. This isn't an issue of either or. It's both. We need a balanced structure that supports privacy and protects the integrity of aviation commerce. So where does all of this lead? Because right now, the future of aviation privacy is hanging in the balance, and there are 3 realistic paths forward. Path 1, a tiered access. This is the most logical solution, the one most of us in the industry are quietly rooting for. The public gets privacy, but if you're a professional and you're verified, like an escrow agent or a lender or a broker, you're going to get controlled access to the information needed to keep the system functioning. This is clean, it's safe, it's efficient. The second way is full privacy. Everything goes dark. Names, addresses, histories, all redacted by default. And if that happens, the market slows. Risk skyrockets. Fraud becomes easier. And the cost of doing business goes up for everybody. It's privacy, sure, but with a heavy price tag. And the third path is a hybrid approach. Industry pushback meets political pressure, and we land somewhere in the middle. A smarter system, better authentication, better controls, something that protects people without crippling the machinery underneath aviation commerce. Who knows? We're stepping into a new era, one where privacy and transparency are no longer friendly neighbors. They're on a collision course. The FAA is genuinely trying to fix a real and growing problem, but in the process, they may be unintentionally breaking the quiet, essential infrastructure that makes aviation transactions so fast and so trustworthy and so fraud resistant. And now we handle this next phase. How we balance safety with openness will shape the industry for decades. So we end with this. Can we protect privacy without destroying the transparency that makes the aviation marketplace function? Because if we can't, everything from financing to appraisals to sales enforcement gets harder, slower, and riskier for everyone. Until next time, I'm Jason Zilberbrand. This is The Truth About the Market. Fly safe and stay smart. If you found this episode valuable, take a second to subscribe and share it with someone in aviation who could use a dose of market reality. With thousands of aircraft appraisals completed every year, why trust anybody else? Go to vref.com to learn more.